This video will cover the creation and maintenance of an inventory configuration for a boat. The configuration is managed by the configuration tool on the tools page. This is the configuration form, and it shows the configuration for my boat, Sarah. As you can see, I've defined a number of cabins, 9 actually, and for each cabin I've defined a number of lockers which are used then to create the inventory of all the items I have on board. Now I can add more cabins by increasing this number. Here you can see it comes up with a cabin, or in the case of an existing cabin, I can add more lockers to that if in fact they are there or I want to define them. But this is an existing configuration. Let's go back and show how to start from scratch. To do that, I need to open a different inventory file, a new inventory. Now when I go back to the configured tools, it's an empty inventory. Now you don't need to add all of the cabins and lockers that you may have on your boat when you initially start an inventory. It's probably a lot easier just to define one cabin and a set of lockers in there until you've inventoried the contents of those lockers, and then go on and add more lockers and more cabins. The program will generate a generic name for each cabin, cabin 1 in this case. Probably want to give it a more meaningful name, so I'll call this aft cabin. Now I want to define some lockers. Again, don't need to define all the lockers, so let's just define 2 lockers in here. Now the program again generates a generic locker ID and a generic locker description. There probably is no reason to modify the locker ID, although you can do that. You can make it anything you want. But you certainly want to make the locker description something that's meaningful to you so that you can then recognize where it is on the boat just from the description. So in this case, I think I'll change this description. So maybe the first locker I want to look at is the contents of the navigation desk. And then the second locker, I want to change its description, and maybe this will be the hanging locker is the next one I want to inventory. So now I've got 1 cabin defined and 2 lockers in that cabin. I'll click the Save Configuration to save that configuration to the inventory workbook. It is also many times useful to have a layout diagram in the inventory. This is of a Pearson 424, similar to mine, but you may want anything. This diagram can be any JPEG file you create for yourself to describe your boat. It's useful as done here to either using Photoshop or PowerPoint or any image processing software to identify the lockers and put a label on them, which is the ID that's used by the program. This helps in being able to go back into your inventory and do the updates. To add your own boat diagram to it, just click on the Browse button up there in the upper right corner, and then go down and wherever you have stored the boat images, then you can pull them up. And I've done this now. This is a Columbia 8.7 diagram. Save that layout to the workbook. Close the form. Now we've done the least initial step on our configuration, so we can close the form. Now if I go back to the Enter Edit, the data entry page, I can look up here, and I've got a cabin defined in this page, so I can start adding inventory items, and I've got the 2 lockers defined. At some point in time, I may be ready to add more lockers and cabins to the configuration, and that's easily done by just going back again to the Configure tool, calling that up. Let's say now I want to add another cabin, So I increment the number, creates a generic name. I rename this to as the galley. And now, clicking on the galley, I want to create 2 lockers there, and then I want to rename the description of these lockers. One will be under sink, and the other, change the description of under stove, or whatever lockers you have in your galley. Save this configuration, close the form, once more go back to the enter edit. Now you can see I have 2 cabins, and in the galley I have 2 lockers. And now I can start to do an inventory of the galley. Well, that's a brief overview of the configuration utility in BoatRecordsVBA.